John and I have a long history together. Not really long, guys. It's only like a year in, but of making fun of coaches. We like to do it a lot, and we're going to do it again later in this segment. I like to think of John as a mentor in terms of how to make fun of coaches. But we like going into this season, the coaches we probably believed the least in were Billy Napier and Sam Pittman. However, with 1 week left in the season, Sam Pittman beat Josh Heupel, who we've all been high on earlier this year, and Billy Napier just beat Brian Kelly, who I thought was one of the better coaches in the SEC, and then Lane Kiffin, who I thought could have been in line to take the Florida job. So, John, I have to ask you, have we misevaluated the coaches and how we ranked them and how we would have ranked them at the beginning of the year between those guys?
Well, let's take them one by one. Let's start with the last coach you mentioned, Lane Kiffin. The only real question I think about Lane Kiffin, he's done a great job at Ole Miss. He did a nice job at Florida Atlantic. He had a difficult situation. He did a good job in 1 year at Tennessee in a tough situation. Went to Southern Cal, didn't do great, but scholarship limitations, the program was a mess. So he's got a really good track record. But what we don't know, and we always ask this of coaches, whatever their level is, we wonder, is that who they are? Or can they go higher? Sometimes they go higher, sometimes they never do. And I think with this Ole Miss team, that's a really valid question with Lane Kiffin. I don't know why this team hasn't performed better, because this is a really talented team. And I'm not arguing what a good job there he's done. He's done a nice job of evaluating talent. It is one thing to just get players out of the transfer portal, but you got to get the right players. I think he's gotten the right players, but he doesn't win all these. He doesn't, in the past, he hasn't won what we call the big game. This year, he wins the big game, but how can you explain the lack of killer instinct or whatever you want to call it? You can't put away Kentucky in your home stadium. You outplay LSU all game long, can't put it away. And then in that Florida game, really raised a red flag with me. Jackson Dart looks distraught after throwing a late fourth quarter interception. Game's over. Well, the game wasn't over. The Ole Miss got one more chance. But that's when a coach, particularly one who's good with quarterbacks, to me should say, he should be pumping Jackson Dart up. Hey, Jackson, we're not beat yet. Our defense can hold them. We're going to get it back. Get your head back in the game. Jackson Dart had already lost that game in his mind. And then he goes out there and throws another interception. So when you're looking at that and you're trying to, you want your program to win a national championship, is Lane Kiffin someone you look at? I don't think so. And that's why I don't know that we overrated him. We weren't sure how good Lane Kiffin was. We know he's a good coach, but is he an elite coach? Right now, the answer, you got to raise that question. I don't think so.
Yeah, I think with Lane, I mean, I don't think either of us debates the fact that he knows ball and probably knows it as well as or better than anybody in the SEC. I wonder if he is the guy, and I talked about this, where he's uniquely qualified to get a bunch of mercenaries to play together because he himself is kind of a mercenary, so he can relate.
Yes.
I also think he's arrogant enough to where he's never going to be the guy that can coach players how to handle success. I think this is where him and Deion Sanders are very similar, where both of them, if their teams start winning, they're always going to slip up somewhere because I don't think either of them is capable of keeping their players humble when they're doing well. And I think that's the problem with them.
That's a very good analysis. I think when you look at Georgia, Georgia doesn't win every time. Georgia has some down games, some really bad games, but it pulls that game out against Kentucky. I give Kirby Smart credit for that. He pulls these games out. He had a game a few years ago when he won a national championship against Missouri that he looked like they were a goner. Pulled it out. There's a real big difference in losing a game like that by a narrow margin and winning it by a narrow margin. There's a huge difference in, when you come away from the underdog, say, well, we almost beat them. Yeah, but you didn't. And the fact that these teams can win on their bad days, that's significant. That's what it takes to win a championship. And we didn't see that with Lane Kiffin's team. Everything was set up to be successful. And that point you bring up, let's go back to the Georgia game. Excuse me. That was the game. Admittedly, it shouldn't have been, because Ole Miss should already have beaten LSU, and Kentucky should be unbeaten.
Yep.
But that's the game. Everything's on it. This is Ole Miss's, one of the biggest games in many, many years in Oxford. And Ole Miss looks great. Looks like as good as anybody in the country. And you talk about how handling success. It didn't handle success. It had no business. I don't care how much Florida's improved. Ole Miss is a better team. So
yeah. So
yeah, I think I don't think Florida's looking to hire Lane Kiffin right now. What about Brian Kelly? Remember Brian Kelly? He's one of those guys. I always look at resumes. He's won wherever he's been. That to me is the best indicator of what he will do in the future, what he's done in the past. But sometimes all is not as good as you might think it would be. Like going from Notre Dame, here's how he looked at Notre Dame and LSU. I can maybe make the playoff at Notre Dame, but I can get better players at LSU, and I can not just make the playoffs, but win a national championship. My goodness, Les Miles won a national title at LSU. Coach O, Ed Orgeron won a national title at LSU. On my worst day, I'm brighter than those guys. On my very worst day. But when we look at what's going on with LSU, that team looks to me as though it's checked out. And I don't know if he doesn't have, to me, the same kind of player at LSU that he had at Notre Dame. And it takes a different skill set to manage the players he had at LSU. That's pretty big generalization, but that's my experience. I'm pretty familiar with LSU. Yeah, he's got some talent, but he's not getting the most out of it.
What's weird to me about Brian Kelly is, you're right. I felt like it was a Lane Kiffin thing where Brian Kelly just may not be the best with people and players and isn't motivating properly, because while Coach O ain't the brightest bulb in the box, he can at least let the staff do the work and then he'll motivate the players to play. But what do you think of, from an X's and O's standpoint, John? Brian Kelly he cut his teeth as a defensive coordinator, and he's making some defensive decisions that I think you and I know is outdated in football, like putting defensive ends at middle linebacker. That's not something you do anymore because of how fast offenses are, and he still does it.
Well, see, this is mystifying to me, because you go back to 2 years ago when Harold Perkins had a great year as a freshman. And I look at this guy. There's a first-round NFL pick, no doubt about it. That's an all-SEC player. He's a freshman, but this guy's one of the most impactful players in the SEC. He's a pass rusher. He's a disruptor. And then Brian Kelly said, no, I think he can help us more inside at middle linebacker. I think a middle linebacker is a very instinctive position, and a position where repetition significantly helps. It's all about recognition at that position. I think a lot about it. You might be a step slower than somebody else, but you've got ability to recognize plays and decipher what's going on quickly. You gain that step back. So why did he make that move? That move did not look good. And I didn't think that in hindsight. I mean, I thought in hindsight, but I thought it at the time. Why are you taking an elite playmaker like this guy and moving? So I don't know that was a bad move, and that raises a red flag. I think the lesson learned here, Caleb, we could both adhere to this maybe, is don't be so quick to say somebody's a great coach, and don't be so quick to think just because a coach did well in one situation, that he will do well in another. And again, Brian Kelly's track record suggests he could. But you go back to 2023 team, how many times will you ever have a quarterback like Jaden Daniels?
Yeah, that's a great point. And
I mean, he makes up for so many shortcomings.
it reminds me, and I know you guys all covered it, it feels like Tennessee wasted Peyton Manning's senior year, even though they won the SEC title, by putting Leonard Little at middle linebacker. If Leonard Little's playing edge rusher that year, they probably beat Florida, don't they?
Well, see, that again, that's falls under the category of wanting to get your best defensive players on the field. Tennessee was loaded at linebacker. I mean, it had really good linebackers, so it can put Leonard Little at linebacker, and he's got three really good players there. Leonard Little was never meant to be a middle linebacker. That did not. Yeah, he's athletic, he's fast, but he wasn't a middle linebacker. He didn't have a middle linebacker's mindset or instincts, and other teams exploited that. You're right. That game was, yeah. That's a great example. That's an even better example to me than what Harold Perkins is, because he took Harold Perkins as a freshman after his freshman year and said, "I think I can develop him into a middle linebacker." He couldn't. So, and now, of course, Perkins has been hurt this season. So we think, what do you think is going to happen with Brian Kelly? Now we've got to look at him in a different light. I thought he's going to. My initial thing when he was hired, he'll win a national championship at LSU. I would have bet on it.
I would have too. I think
I wouldn't make that bet now.
I think they're still going to keep him because he's got a top 5 recruiting class coming in. And if we remember, there were a couple years at Notre Dame that got really down when he was there. He did go 4-8 in 2016 and kind of turned it around. So I think they'll stick with them. What about this with somebody like Sam Pittman? Did we misevaluate him, or is it just he is what we thought, which is a good motivator, but just terrible in X's and O's on the field?
I think Sam Pittman is a likable guy. I think his players like him, and I think when players like a coach, they play hard for him. I don't think lack of effort has been Arkansas's issue. I don't think Sam Pittman is a top-notch college head coach. He's not but he's done better this year. And I know people don't like Bobby Petrino, and people say the game has passed Bobby Petrino by, but I think Bobby Petrino saved Sam Pittman because I saw his quarterback at Boise, and I didn't think it could win with that quarterback, Tylen Green, in the SEC. So I give credit to Bobby Petrino. Yeah, he's athletic. He can run very deceptive speed with those long strides, but I think he's thrown the ball pretty well. He looks like a better quarterback, a better version of what I saw against Boise. Don't you think that?
Oh, I agree. I absolutely agree. I'm going to ask you to rank those 4 coaches real quick from what you know now compared to what you knew at the beginning of the year. Sam Pittman, Kiffin, Billy Napier, and Brian Kelly. Just real quick, the show brought to you by Double D Piping.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best in fire prevention.
All right, John, before Football IQ, those 4, Napier, Pittman, Kiffin, Kelly.
Well, are you asking me to evaluate them?
Yeah, who would you hire first and who would you hire last?
Gosh. I would go back to what happened before this season. I would still take Brian Kelly and Lane Kiffin over those two. In fact, Billy Napier, I think Billy Napier will be fired at the end of next season. I think Sam Pittman will be fired at the end of next season. I think they both things look better this year. But when I look at Florida, everybody's talking about how Billy Napier, under the most adverse circumstances, held these teams together. Florida had some talent, and he lost games he could have won. He should have beaten Tennessee. He had the better team that day, and he lost
that game away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I wouldn't trust him. Okay, maybe he gets more. Florida gets its NIL house in order. Next year, it comes on strong in recruiting. It's got a better roster. It's got a playmaker at quarterback. Everybody's loving DJ Lagway right now. But I don't see great things happening. Maybe Florida will go 8-4 next year, but I don't see a championship team under Billy Napier. Sam Pittman, I think 6-6. That's going to be 6-6. Maybe he can go 7-5. Yeah, that's all I would expect from him. I guess I have a trouble. I guess maybe I might take Lane Kiffin over Brian Kelly right now. That's a hard call, but I just haven't been impressed with what Brian Kelly's done with these players at LSU, and I don't think they believe in him. And I don't think that's Ole Miss's problem.
Sorry.
So I guess if I had to pick one of these guys, I'm the AD and I've been hired to win a national championship or I'm going to get fired as AD. Mm-hmm. Go out and hire one of these football coaches. Who am I taking? I would probably take Lane Kiffin.
I think I would too. And if I were LSU, I would look at Lane Kiffin over Kelly.